Hello and welcome to TVS Correspondent, the show where we take a look at what's happening in the US and around the world. I am Radzi Ahmad, and with me is our correspondent for the United States of America, who is now in Washington, D.C., Alfian Zaini. Alfian, pleasure to have you back.
Pleasure to see you too again, Radzi.
All right, let's get into it. We have received news that top U.S. health officials said they believe that Pfizer Incorporated's COVID-19 vaccine could be authorized for emergency use for children aged from 5 to 11 years old by the end of October. This is according to two sources with the news agency Reuters, which published the story. This comes in light of vaccine makers racing to submit clinical data seeking regulatory approval from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for the use of their vaccines in children below 12. I do have to remind you, though, that the October date for authorization of the Pfizer vaccine isn't confirmed yet, but nonetheless, this is some very hopeful news. Alfian, I want to ask, how did the sources arrive at the October date for the emergency use authorization of Pfizer's vaccine for children?
Right, Radzi. The sources said the timeline is based on the expectation that Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech will have enough data from clinical trials to seek emergency use authorization for 5 to 11-year-old children from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, towards the end of September. They anticipate the FDA could make a decision on whether the vaccine is safe and effective in younger children within 3 weeks of submitting the emergency use authorization. According to the source, top U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci said that if the data supports the vaccine's use, by the time we get to October, the first couple of weeks of October, the Pfizer product will likely to be ready.
Well, the fact that the FDA will only take weeks to authorize instead of months, which it previously took to authorize emergency use for children over the age of 12, suggests that it is considering a quicker path to authorize a shot for children. Alfian.
That's right. The FDA said on Friday it was looking to complete the data review as quickly as possible because right now they are under pressure from millions of Americans who are eagerly anticipating the decision, particularly parents whose children started school in recent weeks amid a wave of infections driven by the Delta variant.
So what does the FDA require from the vaccine makers in order to authorize the emergency use of vaccines for children?
Well, the FDA's research director, Dr. Peter Marks, said they are not expecting full-scale efficacy trials in children, but they are expecting a demonstration that the immune response that's generated in children is comparable to the types of immune responses that they've been seeing in adults. Besides that, clinical trials testing COVID-19 vaccines for children are expected to include a monitoring period of at least 2 months after the half of the participants get the shots to ensure safety.
Okay, and what about children younger than 5? When can we expect approval of vaccines for this age group?
Emergency use approval for children under 5 is likely still months away, as Pfizer expects to report data for approval in 5 to 11-year-old children at the end of the month. But it said data for kids that are aged 2 to 5 years old could arrive soon after. Emergency use approval for children under 5 is likely still months away, as Pfizer expects to report data for approval in 5 to 11-year-old children at the end of this month. But it said data for kids aged 2 to 5 years old could arrive soon after. As for children between 6 months and 2 years old, Pfizer said it could have a safety and immunogenicity data as early as October or November. So we can likely expect emergency use approval sometime then. Let me add that BioNTech is also seeking to request approval of the vaccine with regulators all over the world for children between 5 to 11 years old over the next few weeks. They expect to file their regulatory dossier sometime this month, and it has also laid out plans to seek approval in children aged 6 months to 2 years later this year. So we can likely expect the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine to be available to all age groups worldwide by the end of the year, Radzi.
Well, that is certainly hopeful news. Already, we are seeing countries vaccinating children as young as 3 years old. Countries like China and Chile with the Sinovac vaccine that was approved by the WHO as safe to use for children.
Yes, but on the other hand, we have the Cuban government vaccinating children as young as 2 years old with their own homegrown vaccine. Local scientists said the Cuban made vaccines are safe and effective, but so far have provided little data to outside observers. So when it comes to children, absolute certainty of the safety of vaccines must first be made. Radzi.
Yes, that's absolutely right. We'll be right back after a short commercial break. Don't go anywhere. And we are back on TVS Correspondent, still on the topic of COVID-19 and vaccination. President Joe Biden on Thursday announced sweeping actions to vaccinate tens of millions of American workers, including private sector employees, healthcare workers, and federal contractors. He used the full force of his presidency to push 2/3 of American workers to get vaccinated against the coronavirus. President Biden also moved to mandate shots for healthcare workers, federal contractors, and the vast majority of federal workers who could face disciplinary measures if they refuse. Now, Alfian, what made the president do this?
Radzi, yes. Well, it's safe to say that the actions he's taking reflects his deep frustration with the roughly 80 million Americans who are eligible for the shots but have not been vaccinated. President Biden was initially reluctant to enact mandates, but now these sweeping actions are the most expansive actions that has taken to control the pandemic since he assumed the presidency in January. Experts say he is moving more aggressively than any president in modern history to require vaccination, and this will affect almost every aspect of American society.
Could you explain to us what these actions are, who they affect, and what would happen if people decline to get vaccinated?
First off, he ordered mandatory vaccination for nearly 300,000 educators in the federal Head Start program on Thursday. Then he announced that he would use the Defense Production Act to increase the production of rapid testing kits and would probably work with retailers, including Amazon and Walmart, to expand their availability. And he said the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, would now double fines on passengers who refuse to wear masks, among other steps. Also, Mr. Biden is acting through a combination of executive orders and new federal rules. Under his plan, private sector businesses that have 100 or more employees will have to require vaccination or mandatory weekly testing. Roughly 17 million healthcare workers employed by hospitals and other institutions that accept Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement will also face strict new vaccination requirements. Last but not least, the mandate for federal workers is an especially assertive move by the president. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said, if workers decline to receive shots in that time frame, Ms. Psaki said that they will go through the standard of HR process, which she said would include progressive disciplinary actions.
Well, those are certainly assertive and sweeping actions indeed, but in my opinion, completely necessary if it means getting the remaining 80 million Americans vaccinated. But I'm sure the reaction to this mandate were colorful, so to speak.
Totally. Colorful would be a way to describe it. The mandate was praised by doctors eager to slow the spread of the coronavirus, but some experts feel it may be too little too late. His plan was also announced in a deeply polarized environment, and Americans opposed to vaccination might not like being told what to do. The American Hospital Association said the mandate may result in exacerbating the severe workforce shortage problems that currently exist. At least one major labor union challenged the mandate even before Mr. Biden delivered his speech. Kathy McQuiston, Deputy General Counsel for the American Federation of Government Employees, a union representing some 700,000 federal workers, said that her organization would be working with agencies to not skip over procedures and make sure employees have done process if they were disciplined. And Republicans, of course, condemned this move, calling it unconstitutional. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem promised legal action against it. Governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, said he issued an executive order protecting Texans' right to choose whether or not they would be vaccinated, and that Texas is already working to halt this power grab. Governor Doug Ducey of Arizona questioned how many workers will be displaced, businesses fined, and children kept out of classroom because of the mandates, and he vowed to push back.
Well, it seems like President Biden got his work cut out for him.
Well, he made it clear that if those governors won't help them beat the pandemic, he will use his power as president to get them out of the way. Radzi.
What an absolute lad. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Alfian, as always, thank you for the insight.
You're welcome, and thank you, Radzi.
Thank you all for watching, and join us next week on TVS Correspondent. I am Radzi Ahmad with Alfian Zaini. Stay safe and bye-bye.